my own.
My past has been erased with just one touch from you. My clouds, my rain, my pain has changed. Your blood has made me new. Oh, Lamb, so true. I surrender to you. My life, my love, my own. And when this world has come to end and paradise with you begins. Well done, you'll say when I see your face. My life,
I give you,
my love,
I give you my own.
my own. My past has been erased with just one touch from you. My clouds, my rain, my pain has changed. Your blood has made me new. Oh, now, so true. I surrender to you. Oh, so true. I surrender to you. Oh, so true. I surrender to you. My life, my love, my own. Jesus, you are my life,
I give you,
my love,
I give you
my own. Jesus, you are my life, my love, my own.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Sabbath. My name is Dominique Cummings, and it is my ultimate pleasure to be with you tonight to welcome you to a continuing series for better or for worse. For the entire month of March, we're going to be addressing family matters. And tonight is no exception as we address communication within the family unit. So this series is every Wednesday evening at 7:30, every Friday evening at 7:30, Sabbath morning at 11 o'clock every week for the month of March. So we look forward to having you join us every time we meet on this series. If you look at the advertising that's been put out, there is a QR code that you can scan and ask your anonymous questions, and we will be happy to answer your questions as they come in. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Sabbath, where our pastor, Pastor Dotton, will be talking about about manhood. His topic is actually, can dry bones be revived? So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at Tabernacle. Also, you can follow us on YouTube and on Facebook if you can't make it to the church. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Kind Father, we want to thank you tonight for bringing us safely to the end of another week and to the opening of your blessed Sabbath day. We pray, dear Lord, that you'll continue to watch over us and keep us. Bless our endeavors, Father. Pour us a double portion of your unction of grace and mercy upon our speaker tonight, that her words will be life-changing and transforming, and that every person who hears this message will have a revelation and an opening of the mind regarding how to communicate within the family unit. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. Bless our Sabbath day, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. And now we'll listen to our theme song, Love at Home, sung by Linda Cummings.
There is beauty all around when there's love at home. There is joy in every sound when there's love at home. Peace and plenty here abide, smiling fair on every side. Thine doth softly, sweetly glide when there's love at home. Love at home. Love at home. Time doth softly, sweetly glide when there's love at home.
Everyone, I'm Dr. Lynn McCalla, and I'm here to present to you my wife, Judith McCalla. She's a clinical psychologist who practices here in Miami. We attend Tabernacle Seventh-day Adventist Church, and she is a former professor on the faculty at University of Miami. And so she's always exciting to hear, always informative. You're going to get some information you probably never had heard before or presented in a different light. So listen up. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Len. So when I was given this topic to talk to you about communication in the family, the first thing that struck me was there's just so much that you can say. You know, it's such a broad topic. And so I have decided to do an overview for you guys tonight, because it's going to be really hard to cover everything in, you know, like 40 minutes or so. So I really want you, as you listen, if you have questions, to put your questions in the chat. And I'm going to ask Dominique if she could watch the YouTube chat and let Len watch the other chat, and that way you'll be able to get your questions answered tonight that have to do with communication in the family. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it says I can't share my screen while somebody else is sharing, so I could just talk. I don't have to share my screen. So we're going to talk about communication, which probably will work fine anyway. So communication in the family, an important topic, right? So why should we focus on communication? Well, good communication is vital for successful family relationships. And when we feel heard, it decreases our negative emotions and makes us more open to resolving conflicts. Not only that, but feeling heard and understood increases trust and caring among family members. Okay, so that's why we're getting into this topic. And really, if you think about it, if you improve family relationships, family communication, it leads to strong and positive family relationships. And so if you are in a home that has strong family relationships, it makes the members of the family feel secure and accepted and loved in spite of any shortcomings that they have. It also helps families to respect differences of opinion, and it teaches people how to resolve problems respectfully. And one great benefit of improving family communication is that you set an example for your children. You teach your children how to use these skills that they see demonstrated by their parents to develop their own healthy relationships. So, before we get into the good stuff, let's talk about some of the negatives, some of the examples of bad communication that people engage in on a regular basis. The first one is called truth and blame. Truth and blame is when you insist that you are right and the other person is wrong, or you say the issue is entirely the other person's fault and you have nothing to do with it, it's all the other person. So that's truth and blame. The second one that's common is denial. You insist that you don't feel angry or hurt or sad when you really do. So you are in denial. The third one is diversion. Diversion is instead of dealing with how you feel in the here and now with the issue that you're talking about, you just bring up all the grievances about past injustices. You know, a lot of men like to say women do this all the time, that women have brains like elephants and they don't forget anything. But it's not just women that do this. Men can do it too. So remember, this one is dealing with bringing up things in the past instead of dealing with what's happening now. That's diversion. The next one is an interesting one. It's called counterattack. Instead of acknowledging how the other person feels, you respond to their criticism by criticizing them. So somebody says something about you, where you say, well, you're no angel either, and then you tell them what's wrong with that. So that's counterattack. And the last one that I want to mention of this list is called demandingness. In demandingness, you say that you're entitled to better treatment, but you don't tell the other person how you want them to treat you. You don't use any direct, straightforward communication. You just expect them to know that they need to treat you better. And what does that look like? So that's demandingness. Okay, all of these that I just shared with you come from the Feeling Good Handbook. And the book was published like way back in the 80s, and these things are happening today. So we haven't changed much in like 50 years. And it was going on before that happened. Now, that's not all there is. There are other things that we do as individuals that get in the way of good communication. One is this, and I bring this up all the time with my patients, is assuming that we know what other people are thinking or that they should know what we're thinking. When you assume you know what somebody else is thinking, that is called mind reading. And it can get you into trouble because you're not necessarily right in what you're saying. The other thing that gets people in trouble with communication is focusing on what you're going to say in response to what the person is talking to you about, instead of listening to the person in the first place. So when somebody's bringing something up and you hear anything that you perceive as a criticism, your response is, let me see how I'm going to defend myself. And then you're not paying attention to what they're really trying to say. And the last thing I want to talk about is in terms of what things get in the way of communication is assuming that you know what is right for other people and trying to convince them of that. Okay? So these things that I've all mentioned are all things that get in the way of good communication. Now, you might say, well, what does the Bible say about communication? I'm going to talk about things that relate to the family. So one text that comes to mind is Ephesians 6:4, which says, "And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." In order to have training and admonition, you have to have communication. And often the way that fathers provoke their children is through what they say, in addition to what they do. So that is a text that relates to that topic. Another one that we think about is, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Ephesians 5:31. In terms of communication, I want you to think about this. This text says that a husband should leave his father and mother and be united with his wife. And of course, I think it's true the other way as well. But the two become one flesh. Now, let's face it. You are two people who come from two different homes. You were raised in two different ways. And so it is a challenge for you to merge these two families to become one flesh. And so this is why communication is vital, because you cannot really have this one flesh occur without proper good communication. And then finally, I want to say, finally, all of you is a verse in Ephesians 5:8-9. Live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, live as brothers, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. Another text that talks about speech and talks about communication and how we live in harmony with each other. So good communication, as we can see, is promoted in scripture. And the Bible even says a soft answer turns away wrath. So the way you speak to somebody can change the context, can change the communication that is happening. And so it is very important for us to think about how we communicate. Okay, so communication has three parts. What you say, so speaking, listening, and body language. Now, body language is one of my favorite things to talk about. I love to talk about body language. And body language is defined as the use of physical behavior, expressions, and mannerisms to communicate non-verbally, often done instinctively rather than consciously. So think about examples of non-verbal behaviors. So here, let's start. Your facial expressions. You can look, or that's relating information about what I'm doing, right? Whether I look happy or upset. The gestures that you make. So when we talk about gestures, how you express yourself. So not only how we express, but even things that we do, symbols. For instance, the okay symbol that we use in this culture is actually an obscene gesture in other cultures. And so if you did that in another culture, you would be insulting the person to whom you are speaking. So it's really important for us to think about how we communicate, not only our facial expression, but our gestures. Okay, another topic that is another part of good communication or body language is your posture. Think about it. When you are kind of slumped over, you look like you are maybe shy or trying to hide. You give that impression to someone else versus sitting up, walking erectly. You express confidence when you do that. So these are all things that happen without a word being spoken. I think one of the most fascinating things about communication is your voice, or not, body language is your voice. So when we talk about your voice, I don't mean just what you say, but how you say it. So when you speak, you express information in the tone of voice, how loudly you speak. If you speak very softly, it shows timidity or shyness. Your inflection, you know how somebody can say something and the words are good words, but the message that they're telling you is not. That is tone of voice. People can be sarcastic in their tone of voice. So that's something else that people don't really think about. The way that they make inflections, all these things. And when you speak to somebody, if you say things like,
Hey, Bobby. You want to
So
hear
here-
this thing?
I think, can you, oh, thank you. You just muted her, thank you. So we have nonverbal communication that's happening to us. Something else is touch. When you see somebody who is dating, you notice that they tend to touch each other, and it's a different kind of touch than you would touch somebody you're not dating. Or when you shake somebody's hand and you give them a wimpy handshake when you don't really want to touch that person, versus a confident shake. Patting somebody on the back or giving somebody a hug. Those are all examples of nonverbal communication that we share. And also the last one is personal space. When somebody steps into your personal space, this can feel to you as an invasion, or somebody who is giving you a message that you're hearing loud and clear about how they feel. Invading a person's space can be perceived as being aggressive to someone. Okay, so I wanted to tell you that body language, a fascinating part of it that we don't really talk much about, and whether you're aware or not of your body language, whenever you interact with another person, you are continuously giving and receiving communication, wordless signals to and from the person. So it's important to be aware of the nonverbal communication that you send. So, for example, positive could be hugs and kisses and smiles. The negative would be like an upset tone of voice or frown or not touching somebody who you probably should touch. And so I want to give you guys an example of body language. And I want somebody to put in the chat, what do they think that I am portraying? And Len is right here, and Dominique is there, so she can tell us what she's hearing, and Len can tell us what he's hearing. So I'm going to use a phrase. I'm going to say, I am fine. That's what I'm going to say. The words, I am fine. And tell me what you think I am portraying. I am fine. So, well, he didn't even wait. My husband said right next to me, say it louder so they can hear.
Anger.
Anger. So it doesn't, what I want to tell people is you can say the right words, but if your body language is not in agreement with what you're saying with your mouth, the person who is listening to you will follow the message that your body language is sharing. Said I was upset. Yes. So whenever there's a discrepancy, the body language is assumed to be accurate. And this is why, and this is something people haven't really thought about, but this is why emojis were invented. Because when people started texting, the words alone did not give enough information. Because we get most of our information from our nonverbal cues, our body language. And so they had to come up with emojis to help people to uncover that. Okay? So I just want you guys to be aware that your body language is very important. Now, the other aspect that I want to spend a little bit of time on is active listening. I'm not spending a lot of time on speaking because boy, can we speak. So I'm not going to spend too much on that. I'm going to focus more on the active listening because I think active listening is something that we struggle with. Active listening is a way of speaking, a way of listening that lets them know that we are paying attention to them and trying to understand the message that they are telling us. So there's some tips that I want to give you about active listening. Number one, make sure that your body language conveys that you're interested and listening. So if my husband is here next to me and he's talking to me and I am busy checking my phone, what am I saying to him? What do you think I'm saying, Len?
You don't matter.
I'm not listening. You don't matter. That's what he says. So parents often think that if they just tell their kids, yes, I hear you, or yes, and they're not attending, that the child should know that they're paying attention. And it does not even happen with parent and child. It can happen with spouses. You know, the worst time to ask your husband for anything is when he's watching a sports game. Do not ask him for anything at that time because he's not listening. Even if he says yes, he doesn't know what he said yes to. That's not appropriate to do. And don't use that as a way of getting around or making somebody do something that you knew that they didn't want to do. So again, we want to make sure that it conveys, the body language conveys you're interested in listening. Reduce any distractions that prevent you from focusing. If somebody comes up to you and says, can I talk to you about something? And you're watching a TV show, you have two options. You can say, can we talk about this when this is over? Or better, click, let's talk about this now. Give the person your undivided attention. You have a choice. I'm not going to tell you that you can't finish your show because I know for some people that's an important thing. So, but I want you to know that you have the option of showing that other person that you are really focused on them and you're reducing the distraction so you can hear them completely. Now, the next tip about active listening is listen for two things, not only the content that the person is sharing with you, but the feeling behind the words. If somebody says, I was nearly in an accident on the way home, and that really made me just whisper a word of prayer that God spared my life. What do you think is the feeling, Len, that I'm trying to share when I say that? Give it your best. Oh, okay. He says he wanted me to say it again. Okay. So what I'm saying is listen to the context and the feelings that I was like, on the way home, I was almost in an accident. And I just had to whisper a word of prayer that God saved me from that accident. What is the feeling that you think I'm sharing? And the one thing about trying to share feelings is you don't have to be accurate. If you're not, the person that you're speaking to will correct you. So it's good practice.
That you're
Okay, that is the context of what I was saying. The feeling is I was probably scared. And so the more we practice this, the more that we engage in this kind of active listening, we get better and better at it. Better and better at identifying what the emotion is that's being shared, better at summarizing what the person is saying to us. That's an important feature because when the person is finished speaking, you should paraphrase what they said. Do not parrot back word for word. You are not a parrot. You want to give the summary of what they're saying because when you parrot back exactly what the person says to you, it makes the person irritated. So you don't want to do that. And the final tip I want to share with you about communication, active listening in particular, is do not offer advice unless asked, because unwanted advice shuts down communication. If somebody says, I want to talk to you about something. Talk. And don't turn around and give them the answer. That's not what they asked you to do. They wanted to talk to you. You can ask the person, would you like me to tell you what I think you should do? Or would you like me just to listen? It's okay to ask that question if you're not sure, because it's better to ask than to blunder into something that shuts down the communication with that person in the family. Okay, so the difference between parroting or repeating for understanding, the question popped up on my screen, and I want to mention that. When you literally go over the, so you said that you did da, and then you go through the exact words that the person used and everything like that. A summary could be, you almost missed an accident and you were scared, would have been a nice summary and paraphrase. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. Okay, so another aspect of communication I think that every family has to deal with is dealing with conflict. When you're dealing with conflict, one thing that we all need to know is it's impossible for everybody's needs to be met all the time. It's just not possible. So compromise has to come into the mix. Compromise doesn't mean that there's a winner and a loser. Let's get that clear. We'll say it one more time. Compromise doesn't mean there's a winner and a loser. Instead, compromise means that you have found a new solution. Okay? And so your goal in dealing with conflict is to come up with win-win solutions. And in trying to do that, it really challenges us in the family to be creative in developing solutions instead of just focusing on getting our own needs met. Because it's not a selfish endeavor. And so in order for win-win solutions to occur in a family, that means that the family members need to practice good communication skills. Everybody's point of view and suggestions need to be heard. And that can often be problematic for people because sometimes, you know, somebody wants to run the show and have their thing be done. And in this case, we're not talking about a dictatorship. We're talking about a family where everybody can share their views. And that's a very important aspect. Because if you're talking about something that's a conflict for the family, the people in the family who are impacted by this conflict should be present at that meeting, as long as they are not infants or little kids who cannot understand what is happening. And if things get too heated, it's okay to have a timeout, 10 minutes, set the kitchen clock or, you know, whatever, and take 10 minutes, let people calm down and then come back to it. Don't walk away forever, but deal with it then. Now, there's some things I think that's critical for us to discuss, and that is no name calling is an absolute rule. Len and I have been married 40, almost 41 years. In that time, we have never called each other outside of our name. And I think that's probably why we're still together after almost 41 years. So it's important because when you do things like that, even if the person forgives you for what you did or said, they have not forgotten what you have said. And I think that is an important thing to bear in mind, that if they have not forgotten, it stays in here. So you don't want to put it in there in the first place. And don't be judgmental about other people's needs, or you're just lazy, or you just want everything to go your way. Don't use those kind of comments in talking to one another. You're trying to create win-win solutions. Now, remember, if you're communicating with if it's a husband and wife, it's easy because I say something and then he can paraphrase what I said so that I am sure that he's hearing what I'm saying. A lot of times in communication, you say something and the person interprets it in a way that you did not mean. So it's important for them to share what they're getting from it so that you can correct if that's not what you meant. This is why it's important to paraphrase, to hear what you're getting, what you're hearing from that interaction. So if you want to create solutions, then sometimes I think the first thing that comes to mind, we're going to try that. That's what people tend to do. That's not a good strategy. You want to generate solutions, several solutions. Some of them could even be silly solutions. It just breaks the tension. It's okay to laugh, you know? And then you want to focus on what is going to really solve this problem. And then discuss the pros and cons of each solution. And then if it's a family, you vote on the solution. If it's only two people, husband and wife, then both, or a parent and child, they both must agree to the solution. So a solution is not a solution if it's one-sided. Okay, that's an important aspect. Okay. So we've been talking about communication. And so I want to just go over a few tips with you to just kind of bring things around. When your family member wants to talk, give them your full attention. Let them share their point of view. Let them share their feelings. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I feel uncomfortable talking to somebody face to face, or if I talk to my child face to face, my child doesn't want to say anything to me. It's fine if you talk side by side, like go for a walk together and talk side by side, or go for a drive and you're side by side, or do the dishes and you're side by side. Sometimes side by side is a way for you to communicate, and it feels like you can share without feeling you're being judged by the person staring at you. So that's something you can offer as an option. Be open in your communication with your family members to talk about difficult things. If you make a mistake, be willing to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. If you're a parent, I think that is essential for you to do. Imagine, or if you say, I got angry about this and I apologize for that. I really should not have lost my temper. The reason it is so important for you to say that is the lesson that your child is learning from you is that parents make mistakes and parents can apologize. I have heard so many people say that their parents have never, ever apologized for things that they've done to hurt them. And that can carry on. You talk about things that go on to the third and fourth generation. This can go on to the third and fourth generation. And that's something that's important for us to do, for us to realize that we have a way to influence our families to make communication better by apologizing. And then the other thing is, don't discuss things when you're angry. When you're angry, you're going to say or do something that you will regret. So you need to calm down and then address it. Addressing in the heat of anger is not wise. Now, another thing for parents with younger children, be prepared for spontaneous conversations. Young children like to have discussions at two times. They like to discuss when they're taking a bath and when they're getting ready for bed. And that's when they bring up things that they have been mulling over all day. So be prepared that this will happen, and just don't shut them off and say, time to go to bed. Don't talk about that. Don't bring things up now. No, be open to it. You don't have to discuss it in full, but acknowledge it. And even if you set a time to discuss it later, acknowledge it in the moment. Now, be ready for spontaneous conversations for difficult conversations with your teenagers. Topics about sex, about money, about drugs, about all these different things, relationships. If not to talk to you, then to whom should they seek? It is important for parents to be willing to talk to their kids about these difficult issues. And I just talked about a few issues. There are other issues too, and be willing to be knowledgeable. You know that you have a young person, you don't know how to talk about it, go look it up. Read some information, get the knowledge so that you can have the conversation with your child And don't wait until your child is in high school to have conversations, because things can happen in middle school. So we want to make sure that we're prepared to have this conversation with our teenagers. West Indian families have a certain habit that I would like us to break. And that is, we are very good at correcting our kids when they do something wrong. But when they do something right, we do not acknowledge it. So I want us to encourage our children with praise. When your child is doing something that you like, when they're doing their chores, you say, well, you did a great job washing the dishes tonight. I appreciate that. You took out the trash without me asking. That's such a wonderful and responsible thing. Encourage your children with praise. Studies have shown that when you praise an action, the action is more likely to be repeated. And that's what you want. You want your children to do these things. When your child has done something that you see them hug a sibling, and you say, that was really nice that you just, showed some love to your sibling. Notice the little things and acknowledge them. Let everyone in the family know that you love and appreciate them. Say the words, I love you. Many people have told me they've gone their whole life and their parent has never said to them, I love you. And if I talk to the parents will say, well, of course I love my children. I provide for them. I give them a place to live. I buy them, things that they need. Saying the words, I love you, and showing appreciation is something that can go a long way towards really greasing the wheels of family communication. And when it's reciprocated, when the child says, I love you back, don't shrug it off. Accept it. Okay, so we've talked about communication. We talked about things that we need to do. Now I want to talk about how do we use quality time to increase communication in the family. Okay. Think about the daily time that you spend together and use that time to laugh and talk. So for example, family meals or travel in the car to and from school. So use that time to talk. I know everybody's on their phones, but spend time together without your electronic devices. That's a great way for you to communicate with one another and actually helps to strengthen the bonds. And the one thing we know is young people these days don't have as much communication skills as prior generations because they are not communicating verbally with many people. So it's a good practice for them because it's something that they will need in the future going forward. It's a good idea to have one-on-one chats with each family member to strengthen your individual relationships. So think about that. You have 3 children, and let's be honest, there might be a child that is most like you, and that might be the child that you spend more time talking to. The other children notice that you don't talk as much to them. You're not fooling anyone. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to spread the love. So that make sure that you talk to all the kids and not just about things that they're doing wrong, but just about finding out about them and knowing who their friends are, what they're doing, connecting to them about the things that they enjoy so that they feel they have a special relationship with you as well. Another critical thing is to spend time with your spouse. Some years ago, I read the study that says in the course of a week, husbands and wives talk only about 6 minutes to each other on topics that's not related to their children. That's not good. Your children will grow up and leave the home. And what do you say to the stranger that you haven't been talking to for these years? So it's important to spend time with your spouse. It's important because you want to show your children that it's good for a marital relationship to have quality time alone together. So have a date night or whatever you need to do so that you spend time with your spouse. And then as a family, you want to do regular fun things. whether it's game night or beach day or whatever it is, or going to a game together, whatever it is, you want to do something as a family that is fun for everyone. So we've talked about fun things to do. We've talked about improving quality time. And I want to give you a few more tips before we wrap up tonight. When you set chores for your family and for the kids, make sure that you are clear about your expectations. What do you mean? If you say, clean your room, does this mean push everything under the bed or throw everything in the closet? Is that what you mean? Be explicit about what you mean. And everybody should make a contribution. As long as they're able to do things on their own. The little child could maybe bring the napkins to the table. Everybody has something that they do. So it's something that they all feel like they're contributing to the family. It's a good idea to have family meetings. If you're planning a vacation, have everybody in the family make a suggestion and tell why they would like to do this. This doesn't mean that you go to Disney World or Disneyland every year, but maybe every few years you can go if that's what they want to do. So people have a chance to share their point of view and things that they would like to do before a final decision is made. You want to create rules for your family that's clear about how your family wants to be treated, how they want to look after each other. So a rule might be nobody in the family calls each other names, or nobody, hits each other, or whatever rules that you have. This has to be something that you set as family rules. And then as a family, you work together to improve the relationship and solve any problems that occur. So how can you show appreciation to each other? And I'm ending with this. You want to take an interest in each other's lives, attend each other's events. So if one of your kids is in something and everybody in the family can go, let everybody go to support. Include everyone in conversation about the day's events at a family mealtime. So every single person can share something. Use that time, or use even family nights or time together to share family stories about your history, about your parents or grandparents, family stories, memories that can be passed on from generation to generation. And finally, acknowledge each other's differences. Every child is different. Never say, why can't you be like so-and-so? Each child is different. Each child has different strengths, different talents, different abilities. For instance, when I was growing up, I took piano lessons. Oh my goodness, that was the worst thing of my life. I hated piano lessons. I was dreadful at it. It was so bad that the teacher and my parents got together and they made a decision that I no longer had to take piano lessons. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Now, my sister, who's right after me, she loves piano. She plays the piano, she plays the organ. She's very talented in that. That's her strength. Piano was not mine. And my parents were wise enough to realize my talents did not lie there and could let me leave that alone and let me pursue other things that I was better at. So you want to look for each person's strengths and cultivate those strengths. So that brings me to the end of my presentation for tonight. The thing you have to remember is you have to talk to each other. And even when you're not speaking, you're still talking to each other, but non-verbally. And remember, what you say non-verbally, people really believe. So on that note, I'm going to open it up to questions that were in the chats. Dominique, did you have any questions from your end? You're muted.
No, I didn't have any questions on the YouTube yet, but there was one question on the chat on Wing Central.
Okay.
And it's what's the difference between parroting and repeating for understanding?
Right, I answered that question directly. Yes, and so Len, did you have any questions from your end?
No, we didn't have any questions. But I had a question myself.
Okay.
Is what is more important than body language or what you say?
In most instances, they really work in tandem. The problem is when the messages are not in unison. When you're saying something with your body language and you're saying something different with your words, in that case, your words are not as important to the listener as your body language. They will pay attention to your body language, even though your words might be. So you might say, I'm not mad at you in those words, but in your facial expression, you look angry. That person is like, oh, yes, they're mad at me. You see? So they're going to pay attention when the words and the expression or the body language don't match. That's a critical part.
What is that the most important thing in marriage and communication, or is there anything else more important? That question came up with a group of guys that this week that we were talking with, and so I don't know what
to say.
But no, I'll tell you what they suggested.
Okay.
The debate was between integrity or communication. What is more important
for a marriage?
Yeah.
You know, the Bible talks about leaving and cleaving, and what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. So that's part of integrity. That's part of, but I think to have a marriage, because I think we all agree that you have to have integrity can mean faithfulness. That's a given, is to be faithful. But you can be faithful and have a bad marriage because you don't communicate with your spouse. So I think that the best way to improve your marriage is to work on your communication. Because when you improve your communication, your marriage gets better.
Can't you have good communication and a bad marriage too? An unfaithful person?
That's not as common. In fact, that's pretty rare, if ever. Because typically, if your needs are being met, you're not likely to stray. And how are your needs met? When you communicate them to your spouse? If you have good communication, that results in you getting the marriage you want. Or you disagree with that?
Well, I think some people can almost fake it. There are people who can just talk very well, and they sound right, but their actions may not show it. You know, if you check them later on, you find that they're doing something opposite to what they say. Yeah.
Yeah. But remember, communication is not just words. And it you know, because body language is for many people unconscious. If you don't like a person, or if you have an issue with a person, your body language shows that. The way that you interact with the person, the things you do or don't do with the person, it gives that image, it gives that impression. And remember, you can be all saying the right words, but your language is telling the person, no, I don't like you.
I think the saying is 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Yes, so. I've heard that, but I've been looking for the statistics. Right. I could not find the statistics that really give that. They don't have anything truly that's out there, at least anything current. And right. So I didn't want to go ahead and say something that, you know, people say, oh, that's not really true. But a lot of our communication is nonverbal. A lot of it is.
I have a couple of questions on the YouTube chat.
Okay.
Somebody asked, what's the best way to set up chores for teenagers? And the other question is how to open up communication with someone who is a know-it-all.
Okay, so set up chores. So set up chores with teenagers. Teenagers are old enough that they can have a buy-in. So let's say you have a series of chores and you say to the teenager, here's a group of chores. You can select the chores. You have to select X number of chores that you have to do. So you can give them some choice in chores. And often what you find is when people have made a choice, when it is their decision to do something, they're more faithful in the execution of that thing, rather than something is given to them and they feel like, oh, the favorite expression for you, I'm a slave. Like they know what that is. No, you are not a slave, trust me. But you want to get that buy-in. And then what was the second question now? Somebody who's a know-it-all, how do you communicate with them?
How do you open communication with a parent or someone who is a know-it-all?
Okay, so that question is broad and it's a bit of a challenge to know how to answer it directly, but you are approaching somebody because you want to talk about something. And what I am thinking the person wants to say is that person has already made up their mind about that thing. So I'm going to go with that. If it's not, they can find me or text me or whatever and let me know what they really want to know. But I'm going to answer it that way. So if you want a certain action, a certain thing done, you want somebody to have a buy-in with you, you have to communicate with that person. So the best way to do something like that is to use assertiveness. And that is, you ask the person, you state what the facts are without any embellishment. These are the facts. This is how I feel about the facts. This is how it impacted me emotionally. And this is what I would like you to do differently. Many times what we do is we just say, do this. Or we go to a parent and say, can I do this? And there's not that giving the full impact of the circumstances. So for instance, you have a teenager and your teenager says to you, they just got their license and they've been driving now maybe like 2 months. Can I go to the mall with the car? And the parents' instant response is no, and no explanation, no. But the child might be thinking, hey, I've been responsible. I've been driving for 3 months now, and I just want to go to the mall to get church shoes. And the parent is thinking, this child has only been driving a little while. I don't know if I want to trust them with my car by themselves. But that communication is given to each other. So no reassurances can be given, no explanation is given. The more explanations that are provided in a conversation, the better. Because you understand where the other person is coming from and you can make compromise. You had anything, Len, or is yours finished?
Somebody made a comment that some men do not like to talk. After 2 minutes, they stop listening. They shut down.
Yeah, because they're not listening. What they're doing is preparing their defense. The way to get around that is asking the person, okay, I've been talking. Can you tell me, can you summarize in your own words what I was just talking to you about? When you do that like 1 or 2 times, they're gonna start listening because they don't want to look foolish. So there's a strategy that you can use. Okay, there.
You just revealed your secret to Lynn.
Well, I like to do that. I like to ask people, what have I just been talking to you about? The reason is that way I can tell maybe they didn't get it. And I can clarify things. And there's a question here on the chat is like, are there times when inviting or going to a therapist to mediate the conversation is needed? Sounds like marital counseling. It can be needed, yes. But one thing to do is to try some of these strategies first. Because a lot of times family members aren't doing those strategies. When you get married, maybe that wasn't really addressed in your marital counseling. And sometimes, the marital counseling, you were so in love that whatever was said, it just kind of went through one ear and out the next. You're like, oh, love will conquer it all. And you kind of go with that. And so you might need a refresher course so that you can do it. And so, yeah, you can, I don't quite understand for when to mediate the conversation for children or grown children. Grown children are different from children in your home. Grown children are adults. You cannot dictate to adults what you want them to do and be successful at that, unless you're threatening them in some way, like you're withholding money from them or you're threatening to take them to court. It's not going to work. So what you have to do in communication is you need to get the buy-in from the other person so that they understand why you're concerned. And that gets into, here, this is what I've been seeing. This is what I'm concerned about. And I'd like for us to talk about how we can make this better.
One last question. I'm going to read it verbatim, but I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Okay.
It says, what if you don't like father decision and you stop talking and it helps a mental challenged person feel better and decisions are better? Time apart can be good or bad.
Okay.
So it sounds like if you want to stop arguing with that person, you just stop communicating with them for a while to give each other a chance to refocus or something.
Well, okay. So when tempers get heated, you want to have a little cool down period, but the cool down period should not be days and weeks. That's punishment. That's not communication cool down. So if you are dealing with a parent who is very set in their ways, very old school, and their rule is my way or the highway, there are parents like that. You have to ask yourself one critical question. Can you survive, or can you survive this situation? This is a temporary situation and you're not going to be there forever. Is it more likely to keep the peace if you stick to the rules and then when you're out, do what you want, rather than staying in the home and raising a ruckus and making in-home time unsuccessful and unhappy for everybody? That's a question you can ask yourself. I know people who've said that. He said, look, my parents are old school. They want me to do this. I'm going to do this, keep the peace. I've got one more year till I'm gone. I can do anything for a year. That's one way. Another way is try to communicate with the spouse, with the parent, and say, Dad, I've never told you why I want to do what I want to do. And so sit down in a conversation that's not when he's angry and share your reasoning. He has probably never even thought of your reasoning. And you will be exposing him to another point of view. So that's an option.
All right. I think that was the last question, and we were edified, Dr. McCullough. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation.
Well, thank you for having me. There's just so much I can say, but it's only an hour.
I know, but it was wonderful. The questions were very interested. The participation was awesome, and we look forward to the other conversation that we'll be having in the future. We are close to a closing time, so we are just gonna forego the testimonies at the time right now. If there aren't any testimonies, if there are any, I don't see anybody on the
Right.
on the Ring Central. I don't know if there's anyone on Ring Central who wants to give a testimony. I can briefly say though that communication is so important in marriage. Recently, my husband and I, we had a conversation. I am not a good cook, and he likes a certain food cooked a certain way. And when he mentioned to me that I didn't do it exactly the way that he liked it, I told him that it was giving me anxiety every time I cooked it because I was so freaked out about doing it the wrong way.
Mm.
And he reassured me that he would never eat that food again if it gave me anxiety. So that took away the pressure now from me. And just communicating that just took away the fear that I was feeling of being a failure at
Yeah.
cooking the food that he likes.
Yeah.
So
That's a great
communication
testimony.
in marriage is very, very important.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So
Excellent. Mhm.
are we ready to do our closing prayer?
We sure are. And then we'll have announcements and we will say goodbye.
All right. So Len, the floor is yours.
All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to come together once again at the close of at the beginning of another Sabbath day. We're asking you to be with all the families represented here now and help them to be able to get the blessing and the understanding of the value of communication that you would like them to have, so that they may have better relationships in the family, may have better marriages, and just stronger bonds overall. We're thankful for all of the leadership that we have had so far with Tabernacle. We're thankful for our pastor, his wife, and his family. We're so thankful that you brought somebody like Pastor Dutton to lead us. We're thankful for the elders, and especially again for our first elder and his family. They've done a marvelous job over the last couple of years, and with all the strain on them, we know it takes a toll on some of the families, and we're just thankful for those families for what they have done and how they've contributed to the well-being of our church. We're thankful for some of the members who are not able to make it out any longer. You know, we have some who are in the hospital, some in just at home, some in the nursing home, wherever that may be. We're asking you to touch them also, heal them, or at least strengthen their body, reduce the pains, and help that it may be that they may gain the blessings and be a blessing to those who come to visit them. We're asking you to be with those marriages that are in trouble. There are many of them that we see where there's poor communication, selfishness, people making bad decisions about what they need to do. We ask you to touch those minds and hearts and help them, they may be able to center themselves and turn to thee and to make better decisions about their marriages, their families. We're asking you to be with the students, the young people who are going to school. They're under a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety. They're concerned about the future. And we just want you to reassure them that there should be no worries, that you have total control, and that no matter what they may be facing, just turn it over to you and everything will be all right in the end. And again, we are thankful for our church. We're thankful for our families. And Jesus, we're thankful for God that you sent your son Jesus to die for us. Bless us all this evening. We thank you in thy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you
Amen.
again, Dr. McCalla and Sister McCalla. Dr. and Dr. McCalla, thank you. Pastor Dutton, it sounds like you were going to say something, so please, the mic is yours.
And without it, I don't know what any marriage would survive without communication. So I'm thankful for you all. I'm thankful for the presentation tonight. And Dr. McCalla, we want to hear more from you. And so I'm looking forward to the next message here when you'll be coming forward and speaking a word. So thank you again. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. So tomorrow morning, our pastor will be addressing us, and he'll be talking about, can dry bones be revived? Restoring life to dead relationships. So we are excited. We invite you to come and join us at Tabernacle or join us online on the same medium so that we can have a meaningful conversation tomorrow morning. And remember, every Wednesday night, Friday night, and Saturday morning, we meet for the entire month of March, in order to have these family-focused conversations. Thank you again. Have a good night and God bless you.
Okay.